Russian President Vladimir Putin may face a new accusation of war crime and another arrest warrant due to planning deliberate famine in Ukraine. I'm Maria Drutska, and today we will talk about how Russia wanted to starve Ukrainians, as if this has never happened before in history, how the Russians messed up with cheap PSYOPS, as if this has never happened before either, and about other things. According to new data from The Independent, citing a report by the international human rights law firm Global Rights Compliance (GRC), Russia was actively preparing to steal Ukrainian grain reserves and starve Ukrainians several months before Putin ordered the invasion. Experts say that when Russian tanks crossed the border on February 24, 2022, they deliberately targeted areas rich in grain and food production infrastructure. GRC found that Russia's defense contractor began purchasing trucks to transport grain as well as 3 new 170-meter bulk carrier cargo ships as early as December 2021. Evidence of advanced planning for the pillage of Ukrainian food resources on an unprecedented scale. Russia began commandeering Ukrainian farms within less than a week of its invasion, and at its peak was exporting 12,000 tons of grain per day from across occupied territories. The evidence of highly coordinated level of pre-planning will be provided to the International Criminal Court, and GRC hopes it will lead to a first international prosecution against Mr. Putin for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare. It's highly likely Russia will be found guilty. Katriona Murdoch, a partner of Global Rights Compliance, says, and if so, Mr. Putin could face another ICC arrest warrant to go with the one issued in March this year for the unlawful deportation of children from occupied Ukrainian territories. You can read the full article in The Independent, but I will tell you that Russians have always used hunger as a weapon. After the annexation of Ukrainian territories in 2014, they created a humanitarian disaster in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And after the full-scale invasion, the worst situation was in temporary occupied Mariupol, where people had nothing to eat. They just died of hunger. They kidnapped and ate animals from the zoo not to die. Look and compare the photos of Ukrainian soldiers returning from Russian captivity. They just look tortured by hunger, and some even died after they were released because their bodies could not withstand the exhaustion. Russians have repeatedly stated that they will block grain corridors. Russians have repeatedly stated that the Ukrainian nation just should not exist. They use any methods, including hunger. Not that this never happened before. Not that Russians have never killed us, Ukrainians, just because we are Ukrainians, like in the 30s of the last century. Well, you get the idea. What is known about the export of Ukrainian grain from occupied Crimea? The occupation so-called head of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, admitted that Russia sells Ukrainian grain. But later he said that in the Crimean ports they do not load grain for direct shipments abroad. The Center for National Resilience reported in August that the grain harvest collected in the temporary occupied territories of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions is actively being transported by Russians through ports in Crimea, presumably to African markets. Russians also use Mariupol in Donetsk region for exporting grain. Their trucks with grain head towards Novozovsk and Rostov-on-Don in Russia. And guys, please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you want to support the channel and help us grow, you can do so through my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, which I have shared in the description below. And thank you for all your support. And to the news about the failed Russian PSYOPS. Russian military correspondents and bloggers covering the so-called special military operation reported the escape of the current senior officer of the Ukrainian Air Force from Ukraine to Russia. Supposedly, he flew in on a stolen Su-27 plane. Initially, the escape of the Ukrainian Air Force pilot was reported by the author of the Telegram channel Voyevoda, Alexei Voyevoda, himself a military pilot flying a Ka-52 helicopter. Voyevoda claims that he was able to organize the escape of the flight commander together with military blogger Kirill Fedorov. According to Fedorov and Voyevoda, the senior officer of the Ukrainian Air Force was able to fly on a stolen Su-27. Now he is working with special services. We will wait to give him an interview, said the channel author. He also wrote that the pilot supposedly messaged him before the flight, "Boy, bring us some vodka, we are flying home." According to the former Ministry of Information of the Donetsk Republic, a very important and most likely real position, the pilot had been secretly cooperating with the Russian military from the very beginning of this special military operation. The main Directorate of Intelligence of Ukraine refuted the Russian propaganda report that a current Ukrainian Air Force pilot allegedly flew to the Russian side. This was specifically reported by the Russian agency TASS, citing helicopter pilot Ka-52 Alexei Voyevoda, who supposedly organized the flight. This is a primitive and outdated PSYOPS at the level of an extremely drunk Medvedev, said the representative of GUR of Ministry of Defense, Andrei Yusov. The Russian informational psychological operation with the pilot of the Ukrainian Air Force is a response to the mass surrender of Russian occupiers, including officers and pilots with equipment switching sides to Ukraine, Yusov says. According to Ukrainska Pravda, all pilots of the Air Force and ground force of the Ukrainian armed forces are in place. The Ukrainian armed forces pushed the occupiers back 3 to 8 kilometers from Dnipro on the left bank, and the mortars no longer reached the right bank. This was reported by the head of the Joint Coordination Press Center of the Southern Defense Force of Ukraine, Natalia Gumenyuk. However, while military reports daily mention the destruction of 4 to 10 artillery systems, the enemy still continues artillery fire on the right bank. This means that Russians have the capacity to draw these reserves, says Humenyuk. They are not knocked out enough that they cannot bring in additional forces. The total number of the Russian grouping on the left bank of the Dnipro is estimated to be several tens of thousands. Humenyuk knows the exact number but does not disclose it. It is understood that there are many enemies there, and we also have a lot of work. At the same time, the creation of striking groups by the enemy is not recorded. the enemy does not have the forces to prepare for active actions. They are holding a strong defense. Earlier, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine identified one of the main operational goals of Ukrainian ground operations on the eastern bank as preventing Russian shellings of the Ukrainian civilian population on the western bank of the Kherson region, including near Kherson city. And now my favorite rubrics. News from the swamps. Margarita Pavlova, a member of the Federation Council from the Chelyabinsk region in Russia, has stated that Russian women should stop focusing on higher education. According to her, higher education is often useless, and the fixation on it leads to the neglect of the reproductive function. She made these remarks in an interview with PSYOPS. We need to carry out a huge spiritual and moral work. When a girl grows up, what do parents orientate her towards? That she should first get an education, build a career, buy an apartment, and only then marry and have children. As a result, we have a generation of 40-year-old unhappy women who have not realized themselves as mothers or as women. They do not know what home is, the senator stated. Well educated with good job and her own apartment that she bought herself doesn't sound very depressing to me, to be honest. In Pavlova's opinion, we need to stop reproducing young women who pursue higher education because it supposedly doesn't give them anything, and their search for self takes many years, missing the reproductive function. The senator also believes that raising the birth rate cannot be achieved through economic measures. The system of values needs to be reconsidered. Children are not born in rich apartments, but in one's mind, Pavlova stated. She, by the way, has herself a higher education in the field of sociologist, psychologist in the social and cultural sphere at the age of 21. While clearly her social psychologist level is very low. Anyway, see you in my next videos, and Slava Ukraini!